Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us here early in Chicago. Thank you very much. It's great to have in-person Ignites. I didn't like the remote, so this is wonderful to have a group of people we can look at. My name is Sami Kubba. I run the Azure Incident Communications team. This is a team that communicates to customers during impacting events. These events could be maintenance, it could be a retirement of a feature or a service, or in the worst case, it could be an outage. And I'm joined here by David Steele, who just on the 21st of November, it's his birthday, and he's taken time to be with us. So thank you very much, David, for joining us. Joined by David.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening to folks joining online. My name's David Steele. I'm our program manager for post-incident transparency. My job is to talk to customers about outages, to make sure that we learn something new from them, and that it's not some taboo subject that we don't talk about. I know the Ignite conference is meant to sell the sizzle of all the exciting new technologies that are coming out. We want to make it real today and talk about the cloud a little bit more holistically, including some bad news. So we're here to talk about outages and evolving our cultures towards transparency. First up, since Sami and I are both from the Azure Communications team, I should start by saying what the communications team even does. We're storytellers, we're communicators, we're not marketing, we're not PR. Our job isn't to say as little as possible to try to protect the brand. Actually, quite the opposite. Our job is to be authentic and transparent about failures and learnings, precisely so that our customers and partners do trust Microsoft. And so we're not incident management, we're not customer support, we're communications through and through. And so telling our customers what's going on is kind of the whole point. We want to make sure that the cloud isn't some black box and that you can understand exactly what's happening when things are running in the public cloud. And we've been doing sessions like this for a little while. Sami started them back in 2018 here at a conference just like this.
Thank you. Yeah, in 2018, we had a session planned called The Anatomy of an Outage. And just a couple of weeks before the session took place, we had two sessions planned in The Anatomy of an Outage. We were going to talk about these two incidents where we handled things really well and we come out looking not bad. And then 2 weeks before our session at Ignite, we had this massive outage in South Central US, and it was to do with chillers that got knocked offline. And when these chillers got knocked offline, the data center started heating up. And when it started heating up, it got to a point where it thought it was on fire. And when it thought it was on fire, the temperatures were so hot, it shut down any external air coming in. We got evacuated from the data center. The fire brigade came, they wouldn't let us back in. By the time we did get back in, our hardware had been so damaged that a lot of it had been permanently damaged forever. And during this time, while this was happening, we unearthed bugs that hadn't existed in the system. We unearthed global dependencies that we didn't know we had, like single points of failure. So Azure DevOps had a global outage. There were a ton of issues that kind of spread from this one data center going down. Outlook unearthed an aggressive retry logic that had been buried in their code for years. Anyway, all of this to say this kind of cascading event happened. And so now we're faced with this issue to say we have to talk about the anatomy of an outage in like a week and a half, 2 weeks at Ignite. What are we going to say? And my colleague at the time who was doing the presentation with me said, this is going to be a disaster. We have to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it, so I'm out or we cancel the session. And so we decided, okay, well, we don't want to kind of weasel out of this. Let's take the opportunity and kind of tell our customers what happened, what's going on, and what we're learning about it. And we did, and we weren't sure how people would react. And suddenly they reacted more positively than we would have thought. And we thought, through this, now we have a license to be transparent. And this is wonderful. And so it planted a seed for us to continue kind of telling customers and going behind the scenes. So for this year at Ignite, we're like, what should we talk about? What's our South Central of 2024? And the first thing that came to our mind was CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike was a big deal. It was all over the news. Everyone, pretty much, even my mother, learned about CrowdStrike, and she thinks I do computers. And so we sit down and we say, okay, let's talk about CrowdStrike. And so we started looking at it through the lens of an Ignite presentation. And we thought, it's actually not that interesting. It's not that interesting in terms of an outage because Azure pretty much remained unaffected. Customers were impacted using on-prem, and that was a disaster. But the Azure platform was pretty much okay. There were a few customers who had installed the CrowdStrike agent on their virtual machines, and those customers were impacted. It was a tiny sliver of a %. And even when those customers were impacted, it was really interesting because our response was, we did try and help those customers. And it's very difficult to, but our support teams with our engineering teams partnered up very quickly. And we created a system where impacted customers would give us authorization to have access to their virtual machines so we could aggressively reboot them. And the reason we wanted to aggressively reboot them is CrowdStrike said, hey, one of the mitigations is to reboot like 15, 16 times in a row. Just keep aggressively rebooting, and then you can get you can bypass into the next step. And so customers were able, in the portal, to say, yep, I give permission to our customer support agents to go and take this action on behalf of my virtual machine. And so we did that, and we managed to mitigate all those customers, which was wonderful. It was great. But I go back and say, Is that an interesting story? Does that go behind the scenes of an outage? Is that the kind of thing we want to talk to at Ignite? And so we thought for this time we'd take a little bit of a different approach.
Yeah, as we're debating which outage makes sense to talk about, I tried to explain to Sami, a lot has changed since 2018. And in fact, in the last couple of years, we've really expanded our transparency by launching a series of Azure incident retrospectives, customer live streams. We basically do an Ignite session like Anatomy of an Outage after every major outage. If something was a big deal, if it was multi-service, multi-region, we invite all impacted customers to come along and hear a live stream anyway. And so instead of focusing on just one outage today, we're going to reference several as we go through our talk track to point you towards some of these incident live streams that we've done. If you want to hear more about those, we'd much prefer you go and watch the recordings of those customer live streams where you can hear directly from our engineering vice presidents than hear us trying to parrot some of those talking points. And so we won't just focus on one today. Sami, we'll start off talking about kind of how we approach communication.
Absolutely. So when we think about how we communicate during outages, we never think of our competitors being AWS or GCP. When there's an outage in the cloud, our competitor is on-prem. Because when customers have an issue on-prem, they know what's going on, their CTO, CIO, CEO, everyone knows what's happening, the repair items are made pretty clear, everyone is kind of in the know and they get communications. When there's an outage in the cloud, it can feel very different. And so we developed these kind of 5 main investment areas to say, okay, these are the areas that we're going to invest in to see if we can not only meet, but try and exceed what happens on-prem. The first one is around our time to notify. Is it a me problem or is it an Azure problem? And so with our time to notify, this is kind of, it's a metric. I don't really love metrics, but it's our primary metric. And the way over time we've realized that calling an on-call engineer at 3 o'clock in the morning, by the time they splash water on their face, get JIT access, log into their machine, try and find out, sift through all the resiliency that Azure natively has, find out what the impact is that impact breaking SLA? Is it kind of impact at this layer, or is it really deep down? Who are the customers that are impacted? How do we communicate to them now? All of that takes an inordinate amount of time. And so the investments that we're making is it's our AI ops model. It's called Brain. But Brain will automatically communicate to impacted customers, typically within 15 minutes. And today, if we take all the outages that we have in Azure, about 75% of them are communicated via this Brain mechanism, which is fantastic. Just as a side, when the metric was true about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and I thought, well, by this time next year, we're going to be at 90%. What's interesting, as services onboard to Brain, we unearth more of these little bumps that would have gone under the radar with engineers. So it's really interesting. Not only is it improving our time to notify, but it's catching more little bumps that typically would have gone undetected. Our second one is around accuracy or granularity. If customers are running 10,000 virtual machines in East-West 2, and we tell customers there's an issue in East-West 2 with virtual machines, it's not a helpful message. Customers need to know which of their virtual machines in East-West 2 are impacted, and the way to do this is around resource health. And resource health lets customers know, hey, is this your production? Is it your dev test? But these are the investments that we're making to ensure that customers know the state of the resources that could be impacted. The third one is around discoverability, making sure that customers don't go to the public status Azure page to see if there's an outage. We communicate to customers inside their portal, and then customers can configure last-mile notifications from there. And actually, on that, David.
I wanted to pause here for discoverability to mention one of our featured incidents, because we had an issue actually here in Chicago earlier in January this year that was an express route connectivity issue for peering sites that were based here in Chicago. And we actually had some discoverability issues because we tried to run our proactive communications playbook. Now, ordinarily, we'll only communicate to customers in the event that customers are impacted. Hey, there's an outage going on. Here's what's happening. In this case, we had chiller failures in the region that were caused by refrigerant temperatures. Who knew it gets cold in Chicago? And we actually knew this in advance. And so the temperatures were heating up in the data centers, and we decided, well, we could tell customers even before impact. And so we tried to do that, but sent it as an informational type communication that didn't trigger relevant alerts, and so a lot of customers weren't made aware of it. Even when there was impact and we had to kind of proactively shut down servers to bring down the thermal load, that information was miscategorized, and therefore customers couldn't see it in the portal, and some of the alerts hadn't fired. And so it's one of those examples of discoverability where customers couldn't get word out, even though we were trying to do the right thing and trying to be proactive about it. And so we've since updated our communications playbooks. Even if we're giving you an early heads up of heightened risk before impact, we'll still send it as a service issue type comm so that those alerts can still go through. Now, I'm not going to do it justice to explain it to you, but if you're interested in the express route issue, you can go and watch Krista and Pankaj from our data center and express route teams explain exactly what went wrong. But I thought it was a great example here of how we try to make sure we're discoverable and wherever we can, be proactive as well.
Super. Thank you very much. The fourth area of investment in our kind of principles is around parity. And parity used to mean things like, hey, let's make sure that all the services are communicating the same way. It's very true of maintenance. When we communicate maintenance events today, we have a certain number that appear, I'd say this resource will be impacted, and that's a data set. Other times, the resource appears in a string, which is not helpful for customers who are using kind of systems of scale. And a lot of the times, the resource doesn't get listed there, and customers have to go and find the admin email. So parity used to mean trying to harmonize across our services, but pretty much parity is also extended to our clouds. So when customers buy the Microsoft cloud, it sounds wonderful. But when they open the box, they get an M365, they get a Dynamics, they get an Azure, and they all feel a little bit different, and you can smell the org structures on all of them. And so particularly during outages, we're trying to harmonize those things so that it feels like a unified company and one experience. And the fifth one is really around transparency. We try really hard to tell our customers what's going on during an outage, which at times can be bothersome, and we're going to double-click on that today. But when the dust has settled, we really try to kind of have a conversation with our senior leaders about what happened, what went wrong and why, and what we're learning about all of these things. All of these things sound very lofty and very nice, and the reality is within Azure Service Health, customers can get their communications from Brain, they can see which of their resources are impacted, they can set up service health alerts as well, they get invites to these incident retrospectives, these live streams that David was talking about, and so the Azure Service Health is really kind of the place to go to get these updates. Saying that, so if we look at, when we think about outages, we just generally think of them in 3 stages, before, during, and after. And so in this kind of first piece, we'd like to go about, what do we do before an outage? Well, we actually don't do a huge amount, but it's on the customer to start taking some kind of steps towards being prepared. And the first one, I really want to double-click on those Azure Service Health alerts, because the Service Health alerts allow customers to configure the last mile notification. 99+% of our outages are sent to the portal. And from the portal, customers can set up those last mile notifications, which means they can configure an email, an SMS, a webhook, a logic app, a functions. They can put it to people inside their organization, outside of their organization. You can plug it into ServiceNow, PagerDuty, OpsGenie. You can create your own status page. There's a plethora of things that people can do, but looking at the status page isn't probably the best idea. So Service Health Alerts are really a good one. In addition to Service Health Alerts, it could be that there's impact to a customer, but it's not because of an outage. And so customers setting up Resource Health Alerts is a really good idea to say, hey, I only care about this VM or this SQL database, and I want to understand when it goes down, outage or not. Like, I just need to understand the health of this resource. And so Resource Health Alerts are a great way to do that. In addition to Resource Health Alerts and Service Health Alerts, there are other alerts that customers can set up. One of them is scheduled events. If your virtual machine is about to undergo a pause or a blip or a restart, you can consume an API where it says, hey, I'm about to restart in about 10 to 15 minutes, and customers can either have run jobs or create some sort of alert notification. And then lastly, around Azure Monitor. Azure Monitor has a suite of metrics and data sets that customers can look at. You can look at if memory gets consumed at a certain level, if I'm not retrying enough, if my storage is running low, CPU. I mean, App Insights has an array of measurements that customers can leverage in order to get insights into their environment.
You know, this isn't a deep dive session in Azure reliability, but I would be remiss not to point out, since we're in the before an outage, preparing for the inevitable kind of section here, there are a lot of services and features that Azure provides that help you to become more resilient. So obviously, our hero product is availability zones, where those data centers are in areas that have completely independent power, networking, and cooling. So de-risking from those data center level failures is a great kind of first step here. Azure Site Recovery, we had a session yesterday where we included some demos of using ASR not just to fail out of the region, but to fail out of the zone, and to kind of have that BCDR lever even within the same region, using availability zones there. Chaos Studio, I think GA last Ignite, but still feels like a relatively new product for doing fault injection, whether or not you're doing that in dev test and validating some of the assumptions that you've made, or validating some of the architectural decisions that you've got, or if you're doing it in production. If you're a little bit more brave and you're doing something like Chaos Monkey to keep your teams guessing, you can use Azure Chaos Studio and the library of faults there that's always expanding to take advantage of that. It's really where the rubber meets the road. It's all very well and good to think that your app could survive this or that, but until you actually throw this or that at it, then you won't know for sure. And so Chaos Studio is a great start there. I won't go into huge detail, but storage redundancy plans to make sure that the data we keep in triplicate is divided up across zones or regions as needed. We did some demos on virtual machine scale sets and how you can make sure that you have active-active configurations with VMs running even in different zones, so that if a zone has an issue, that your application doesn't skip a beat here. And so if ever you feel overwhelmed by the raft of services and features that are available to you, we've got a bunch of resources and support to try to help you figure out where best to invest and even where to get started. And so Azure Essentials is a really great starting point for you to understand both assessing your environment to find some of those resilience gaps, how to prioritize those accordingly, and then go through and remediate them in order to get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of investing and expanding that resilience here. The Azure Cloud Adoption Framework is really helpful for your organization to figure out how you set a baseline and kind of minimum levels of resilience across the board for your different workloads. And then Azure Well-Architected Framework gets really specific into one workload or one service or one application, and it helps give kind of reference architectures and guidance around how you can improve that. Obviously, we've got things like Advisor in the portal that get into resource-level guidance, but I just wanted to kind of cover, you're not alone. There's a bunch of support and frameworks that can help you in implementing some of these things. I'll pause here. It's a great example to point you to one of our other incident retrospectives. We had a zonal cooling issue in the UAE North. This was just a few months ago in July. Ultimately, well, as we'll talk about, these things don't have a single root cause, but one of the big triggers or contributing factors here was contamination, dust in the air conditioning terminals. Who knew it gets dusty in the UAE, despite kind of regular maintenance and regular routine checks on that kind of thing. So it's a good example here because it actually only impacted about a quarter of one zone. And so even though it was really impactful for some customers, it's a good example of an outage that could have been avoided. And if you had architected to support availability zones, a lot of customers didn't skip a beat here. So it's a good example. During an outage, your favorite section.
Super. So during an outage, it all sounds wonderful that these are all the things that customers can do to be prepared. But during an outage, what happens now? Well, so when my folks or my friends ask me and say, what is it you do again? We'll say, well, yes, there's the piece of typing communications, but really it's about advancing the communications experience and making sure that during an outage, if customers haven't taken those steps that David spoke about, there's not much they can do other than get information and then make decisions. And so when I think about what we're doing, we're really building irrigation systems. And there's such a temptation for Microsoft and for all of us to help one customer at a time. And this customer needs help. What's going on with this customer? Could you let my customer know about this? We speak to account managers and important people all the time and strategic customers. But if we're going to do this at scale, we have to build systems at scale. And I think instead of handing out glasses of water to individual customers, we'd much rather build an irrigation system so that customers have taps and have access to information themselves.
I'll steal it from here because I love this phrase. We're democratizing the dissemination of information. I really like this. Look, every customer, if you're impacted by an outage, every customer gets the exact same incident updates at the exact same time. And so it doesn't matter if you're some big multinational corporation that spends $1 billion a year, or if you're my dad's online magazine that spends $10 a month. It actually doesn't matter whether or not you've bought a first-class cabin or not. You know, when the event of an iceberg, if the ship is going down, it's 50 people to a life raft, and we treat everybody the same. So I wanted to dispel this myth that if you're some big, important, strategic customer, you get more information or you get better information. It's just not the case. And actually, the tools that we use distribute the same information to every impacted subscription, and that's true even internally.
Absolutely. Internally as well, we don't communicate separately to our account teams or our execs or our engineering teams. We try and have single sources of authoring. So we have one tool that publishes, and it publishes the different endpoints. And this can be Azure Service Health, and customers can configure those last mile notifications. It's the Azure status page. It's the internal tools that people consume it as well. So when you call your account manager, or if you call Scott Goo because you have his number, you're going to get the same information because they're reading from the same hymn sheet for most of the time.
Still you.
Oh, is this me as well? Absolutely. So this is an interesting one. Of course, we want to tell our customers which services are impacted, what are the regions that are impacted as well, and the potential workarounds. When we don't have much else, we're trying to build this muscle to say, we've ruled out compute, we've ruled out storage, we're now focusing on networking. We're looking to see whether this was a change or whether this wasn't a change. And here's what we know, here's what we don't know as well. The other piece as well that's really interesting is we want to tell people where we are in the process. We've understood the root cause, we're applying, or the cause could be this, or the trigger event could be this, root cause. The trigger event, this is what we're doing about it. This is how far along we are. We're about 50% complete. We think this is going to recover in X period of time. That information is vital so the customers can take some sort of action.
Yeah, I have conversations like this when I'm on call all the time, where we're talking to vice presidents of our relevant engineering teams, and I say, okay, I've been listening into the incident bridge. I know exactly what we're doing. Here I've captured our mitigation work streams, and we're doing these 4 things, so that's what I'd like to go and explain to customers. And we're on a journey. We have a lot of people at Microsoft that we need to understand the value of transparency and building trust, because sometimes we do hear, oh, don't tell them that. Don't tell them that we're looking at 4 different things. It's going to seem like we don't know what we're doing. And actually, we know as communicators that the most helpful thing we can do to customers is say, well, here's what we're looking into. Here are the current active work streams. Here's what we've ruled out, as Sami said. And actually, it's not bad if we come back half an hour later to say, we've ruled that out. We spent a time checking if it was correlated with recent deployments. It's not. Back to the drawing board. Here's what we're looking into now. And that's why it's okay to say something and then come back later and say, oh, that wasn't helpful. And that actually builds trust in the long term here. Secondly, I wanted to talk about support, because obviously during these times of crisis, Sami's saying we can't go around and hand out individual glasses of water to customers, but of course we do have a support team, and our customer support team are great and they want to help, but our support request isn't always super valuable. And so Sami and I spent a bunch of time after a major incident recently where we actually reached out and spoke to 100 different customers who had opened a support case during an incident and had a conversation with them and said, what did you hope to achieve there? Could you explain it a little bit more? And so that we can try to figure out when is contacting support actually useful during a known issue like an outage here. And I thought this was so important it warranted its own slide. So some of the answers that we got were, well, I wanted updates, right? Something like 60–70% of the people that we spoke to said, yeah, I heard there was an outage and I wanted to understand what's going on. Now, based on the conversation we've had here today, you should know you don't need a support queue for that. You don't need to wait in line and be assigned a support engineer just to figure out what's happening. Through Azure Service Health, and if you've configured those Service Health alerts, we'll come to you, we'll give you all the information you need, and you definitely don't need a technical support case for that. The second one was for tracking IDs. I need a number to put into my system to log it, and this was part of the reason that we added these alphanumeric incident-specific tracking IDs to the communications that we send out. But my favorite one on the list, my boss told me to, and we had this conversation a lot with people saying, I know the support engineer can't help. I know the support engineer doesn't have more information than I'm already reading, but my boss thought it was a good idea, or somebody in my organization told me I should contact support, and so I did anyway. And so you get in the queue and you wait in line and the support engineer talks. Yeah, we've got nothing to talk about because I already know what's happening because I've been reading the updates. Oh, do you need any specific help? No, not right this second. We're waiting for you to come back online. Look, again, not a good use of a support case here. And then one that I want to myth bust is around SLA credits. It did used to be the case a very long time ago in the early days of Azure that to qualify for an SLA credit, if we hadn't met our SLAs and you wanted that uptime guarantee or get a credit back, they would say, oh, no, you didn't contact support. We didn't think you were impacted. Well, our tools have advanced a lot since then. We generally have a good idea of exactly which resources or subscriptions were impacted. And so these days, to qualify for an SLA credit, you don't need to have contacted support during the incident. You just raise a billing request afterwards, and we can calculate the SLA credit. So I wanted to dispel some of these myths. But the two main reasons that it really does make sense to contact support, the first is if the services or symptoms that you're seeing impacted just doesn't match what we're communicating. Sami mentioned a VM issue in East US. Well, if you're seeing the same VM issue in West US, and that's not something we're communicating to you in the outage comms, absolutely contact support. That might be something completely unrelated, and you don't want to assume that that's an outage. Maybe we can help you to troubleshoot it. Or it could be the outage. Maybe it's a helpful signal for us to know that problem is actually wider than one region, and so that makes a lot of sense to contact support. Similarly, if you're aware of everything that's happening and you're reading the outage updates, you might be troubleshooting and you might be trying to fail out of the region. Hey, I'm aware of the outage, I'm trying to use Azure Site Recovery, but I'm running into this hiccup. That's a great example where support can help you to troubleshoot and run away from the problem, and we just want to make sure that our support engineers are freed up to support customers like that, rather than, I'm looking for updates, can you help copy and paste from the same tooling here? So there's definitely value in support, just it depends what you're doing here.
Yeah, and in addition as well, all impacted customers receive a 72-hour window of free support after an outage in case they need some recovery getting back online afterwards. When we think about outages, we don't think of all outages as being equal. There are different types of outages. And as painful as this is, some outages are expected. And some customers should absolutely be mindful that outages are going to happen. They're an inevitability, like death and taxes in America. But the idea is that outages are inevitable. But the type of outage is really interesting. Tors going down and impacting a virtual machine, yeah. So when customers say, hey, is that the kind of thing that happened? It's expected. And my general response is, yeah, it's expected to happen. And these aren't new marketing phrases or things we're putting out. This is kind of the way we think about it. Then there's the outages that are kind of unexpected. Like, that we didn't think that would happen. Multiple services impacted in a single zone. You go, that shouldn't really happen here. And then there's the unacceptable outages, particularly around multi-region, because those are very hard to architect against, they're very hard to protect against. And so multi-region outages, I would call them unacceptable. And we respond slightly differently depending on the type of outage.
Yeah, there are some commonalities here, regardless of how widespread an outage is, whether you're one of 10 impacted or one of 10,000 impacted, there are things you should always expect. And so in these first couple of rows, you get regular updates, the initial notification that fires, and then regular updates to tell you how our investigation or how our troubleshooting efforts are going. That happens across the board for any outage type, and that lands in service health in the portal. Similarly, once we fix an issue, we do a mitigation statement. We say, here's the problem, here's the incident, here's the services that were impacted, it's fixed now, and here's some basic details about it. For some of those minor issues, Sami dropped 𝗲, top of rack switch in our networking. We won't go into a formal post-incident review. We'll say, yeah, it went down, or something lost power briefly, and it came back online 5 minutes later. Yeah, we don't have repairs. That can happen sometimes. Things go bump in the night. It won't get a formal post-incident review with learnings and repairs. But for those bigger incidents that were unexpected, our kind of standard incidents, we go and do an internal retrospective to figure out exactly what happened and what we can learn from it. And then we report back, generally within 14 days, with a post-incident review. And it's only in this final, on the right-hand side case of these big unacceptable incidents, that in addition to all of that, we'll do a preliminary post-incident review. We'll say, hey, we know you can't wait 14 days, so even though our internal investigation is ongoing, here's what we know so far. Generally 72 hours later, here's an early kind of preliminary look at our internal investigation. We also do customer live streams, which we keep mentioning, to invite impacted customers to come along, hear from our engineering leaders, and actually through IEM have a Q&A support to ask questions of our experts, to ask questions about the incident or about your own resilience and how you can learn and improve as well. And finally, in that big unacceptable case, if something's a multi-service, multi-region incident and it's such a big deal, then in addition to providing comms updates in the portal that land in Azure Service Health, we also provide public updates on our public status page, azure.status.microsoft. Which moved recently. I got the URL right, nailed it. And so we do that to try to encourage transparency and to encourage the industry to learn from these kind of big issues. So it's not just secret source to the impacted customers here.
Super. So pretty much up until now, this is everything that we're trying to do, and these are all the things that sounds wonderful. We do impacted customers, we do live streams, and it's great. But really, during an outage, it's not always that great. And I do want to extend an olive branch, because things do get in the way of sending great communications. And while we say wonderful things, the reality can feel different. And we are taking steps, but they sometimes feel like baby steps, and we're heading in the right direction. But the first thing that gets in the way of sending great communications is words. Some of our engineers, they like to pad the communication with words because we don't have much to say, but we don't feel comfortable saying this little, so let's just add things in there. So we say sentences that can kind of come off as fluff, but it doesn't really kind of tell the story of what we're trying to do, and so we add a lot of padding in there. Sometimes we exclude ETAs because we're afraid of being wrong. What if we say 3 hours and it's actually longer? What if we get it wrong and customers are going to be angry? And the stance that we've taken is to say, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be wrong. But it's okay to be wrong and transparent, but you can't be right and opaque. We don't know how long it's going to take, and we were completely right. There are times when we've provided ETAs, we said, hey, this is going to take 3 or 4 hours, and then 3 or 4 hours later we say, you know what, we got it wrong. It's actually going to take another 4 or 5 hours. So communicating those ETAs are really powerful so that customers understand I can either go for a long lunch, or I can go home early, or do whatever it takes. And the other piece is when to communicate publicly on our status page that David mentioned, and when to go to service health. Customers want to have something on the status page because it's easily, and a lot of customers haven't configured those service health alerts. So kind of trading that off is always a thing. But generally speaking, Azure Service Health is the way to go. The other piece is having clear roles and responsibilities. We have engineers in our group who are so proud of their service that they want to own the messaging and the communication. Or conversely, some of them are so nervous to say, don't say that about my service, it looks bad. Say, we have an issue, but we're fully aware of it, and we know what's going on, and it will never happen again. And that's not what's happening. We want to communicate authentically and honestly. Similarly, on the communications team, we have people who used to be in engineering, and so they feel like instead of, when they're on the bridge, instead of kind of doing great communications, they'll start troubleshooting with the engineer. Have you tried to run this query? Yeah, no, I remember this 3 or 4 years ago when I was on the team. I'm like, what are you doing, man? Stay in your swim lane. So making sure people have clear roles and responsibilities is an important one. My favorite one here is the Microsoft celebrities. And what happens when we call it a bridge, but this is it's a team call where people are kind of trying to come on and mitigate. And if it's a big deal, sometimes we might have an exec like a Mark Russ or a Scott Goo show up. And suddenly attention, instead of mitigation, hey, Mark, what do you think we should do? And if Mark says something casually, oh, we'll try that. And it's like, no. So managing these celebrities it's not a heartache, but we understand that it can cause divergence. Similarly, if Kim Kardashian or Taylor Swift walk in now, I don't think anyone would care about the anatomy of an outage and be, oh, Kim, Taylor. But still, that's a real thing that we have to think about. The other piece is that our systems can sometimes work against us. We spoke about that brain system. Brain is really cool because it communicates to impacted customers within 15 minutes. And what it does, it kind of works by service and scenarios. So storage, it can work. SQL, it can work. For virtual machines, it can work. What happens when we have a big outage and all of those things fire? And suddenly we have 18 tickets with different tracking IDs that have landed in customers' portals because that's what's happening. And so now, which one do we use as the primary? Do we close? Do we point people away because we haven't found a way to kind of parent-child those things? It's a non-trivial exercise to do, but sometimes our systems can work against this. In addition to this, if we join a bridge and we speak to the engineer on call, and he said, it's impacting customers. Great, who are the customers? He goes, I don't know yet. How long will it take you to find out? Could be 2 hours. 2 hours? But is it big? Is it small? Are retries working? We don't know yet. And so do we wait? Or do we go public to the status page to say, hey, we don't know who it is, and then later on we can notify all 2 customers? We don't have an answer. There's no rubric. There's no rule. But these are some of the things that we think, okay, and at times we've over-leveraged that status page for like non-issues, and at times maybe we should have gone there, but we were like, we didn't do so. And then lastly, we understand that you as customers also have customers. And we understand that today, the easy options to do is to say, hey, it's not a me problem, it's actually an Azure problem. Look, it's on their status page. And if it's not on their status page, you can send them that PDF from Azure Service Health, which I'll acknowledge now, that PDF looks terrible. It looks like a child hacked it together, and I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing it with customers either. We're working on it. It's something we need to do. But in addition to this, we know that Azure Service Health alerts aren't the answer, because we don't need to forward everything to your customers' customers, because that includes maintenance, SQL. They don't care about that. So we understand that that's a problem we need to figure out. And we're addressing ways, and we're thinking about things that we can do, whether it's temporary URLs or temporary something that you can share with customers that will fade afterwards. But we haven't cracked the nut yet, but these are problems that we are looking to try and solve.
I'll add one more to that list, because we want to be transparent, we want to tell you what's happening, but sometimes it can be a bit of a red herring that sends us in the wrong direction. And so we had an example here. This was a storage outage from July. Actually, it was the day before CrowdStrike. I think the long tail of this storage outage in central US bleeded into some of the CrowdStrike impact, and some of the press pickup actually conflated the two. But this was an issue with some of our storage services. As part of our defense in depth measures, we make sure that our storage in each region will only accept read-write requests from certain ranges of IP addresses. And so we generate an allow list that says, here are the things that are allowed to write to storage, and here are the IPs that are not. And there was some kind of networking hiccup in the way that this allow list was generated, and we were pushing for more details on this. Well, tell us more about this networking change, and kind of zooming in on that to try to be transparent, to fight for our customers and explain what's going on. And it wasn't until Tom Jolly runs our storage team, he explained to me, you're looking at the wrong thing. This just happened to be some network change or network blip, but that was actually one of 10 different triggers that could have gotten in the way of this generating this allow list with the right list of IP addresses. And so it wouldn't be helpful to our customers to zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and explain that, because we need to mitigate this class of problem. We need to mitigate to make sure that as this allow list of IP addresses is generated, we can ensure that it's complete, and we can validate it, and we can make sure that no matter what kind of hiccups got in the way, we're aware of it and we're confident in it, and therefore we can block other access. And so I thought this was a really good example. If you want to hear more about this, is a super impactful outage from July. You can go and watch us interviewing Tom at the URL here. But just to add to Sami's point, it gets in the way. Sometimes that push for transparency has us looking in the wrong direction here. So I'll pivot towards after an outage. This is very near and dear to my heart. Post-incident transparency is the reason that I exist at Microsoft, to make sure that we can rebuild trust after these inevitable outages. And there's a lot of, we're trying to get everybody at Microsoft to sing from the same hymn sheet here when it comes to learning from incidents, and especially how we talk about learning from incidents after these cases. There are a lot of very well-intentioned but ultimately misguided approaches that kind of frame how we talk about an incident afterwards, and I wanted to touch on a few of these now. The first of which we've run a bit of a teaser campaign throughout. We really try to avoid this term root cause. Our outages don't have root causes. Azure is a huge, complex system, and it just doesn't happen that these major incidents have a single thing that went wrong. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge that following each trigger event, there are actually lots of things that needed to be true or not true for our customers to experience the impact that they did. And so we talk about those as contributing factors, their trigger events, their conditions, and actually we're not looking for one. We're not looking for the smoking gun, and once we've found the smoking gun, we can all go and relax. Our job is to try to find and promote and especially learn from as many of these different factors as possible. And so I can hear, John Allspaw and Sean Klein and some of the folks that we work with in my head, whenever somebody's talking about what was the root cause, it's put $1 in the root cause jar, we're not looking for one, let's kind of cast a wider net rather than focus in on less and less. And this is actually a good example for our final vignette. Sami.
Yeah, super. So it was quite recently, as Dave Maltz there with David and myself, and Dave Maltz has a great saying that says, anything on the value can be attacked. And it was an Azure front door issue. And what happened is there was a DDoS attack that was launched on Microsoft. Now, for context, Microsoft get DOS attacks 2,000 plus times a day. A couple of years ago, I don't know if someone needs to fact check me, but I heard outside of the Pentagon, Microsoft is the most DOSed organization on the planet. And of course, we have DDoS protection mechanisms. And as traffic was coming in that was trying to do us harm, we kind of scrubbed it. Our DDoS protection mechanisms activated. We would kind of scrub it. And then if it was, if it was naughty traffic, we kind of got rid of it. If it was authentic, there'd be like a little packet retry. And that was fine. During our DDoS protection mechanism spinning up, there was a control plane outage in the region that the DDoS protection mechanism came up from. Anyway, and that unearthed a network bug as well. When the DDoS subsided and when it finished, it was supposed to resume to normal, but it didn't because of the control plane outage. And in addition, the network bug started routing global traffic from, all over them through this one DDoS kind of protection mechanism, which caused a huge amount of congestion. And so all of these weird things had to line up, and Dave Maltz does a great job of explaining it in the video. But what did customers hear? DDoS. It was all a DDoS attack. We're like, no, you've missed the point entirely. It's not about this one DDoS thing. That was a trigger event, and it led to all these kind of cascading events. So really, really having the experts talk about this, having us write about it, we're trying to broaden the lens here to say there's so much more richness in the information that customers and the industry can share and learn from as a whole.
Right, yeah, great example of what was the root there. The second thing that we really try to resist is framing anything as human error. It was very common a few years ago that a post-incident review would say something like, yeah, this was a human error, Bob shouldn't have made that mistake. Don't worry, we've told Bob off and we're going to retrain the Bobs of this world. And you go, that doesn't make any sense for us to assume that we're going to be able to prevent humans from making mistakes, right? And so instead of talking about human error, we want to frame these up as, how did our systems allow that operator action to result in customer impact? And in fact, if an engineer triggered some unexpected outcome, that's a great signal to us as Azure that our systems or process or tooling actually didn't give that person sufficient visibility into what was happening, or that we lacked the right safeguards to protect the system from humans making that kind of mistake. Similarly, I wanted to mention, we really try to resist blaming the person at the keyboard. The operators at Microsoft that are doing these things, I see people smiling, a couple of people here, there are some operators at the keyboards in the room apparently. We know that we can't fire our way towards better reliability. That's not how this works, right? We have to have a culture of this blameless retrospectives in which all of our engineers, and especially our leaders, actually embrace this transparency and want to be communicative about mistakes and failures and learnings. It can't be something where you want to put your head down and not speak up about problems or failures that you've made yourself. Similarly, I wanted to turn it around to customers and say, look, we want to try to resist I told you so, but customers play a role in the shared responsibility model. Just as we were talking about you holding up your end of the bargain when it comes to investing in high availability or investing in disaster recovery, we want our customers and ourselves to learn from these incidents. And hopefully, if we're doing the right thing, these outages should teach us something new and interesting about our systems, and they should teach you something new and interesting about the way that you use the cloud here. And so we really don't shy away from making sure that our post-incident reviews highlight, here's our high availability guidance. Here are customers that weren't impacted by this because they were architected in this way. And that's not us kind of capitalizing on the outage or trying to get more money out of people. It's about trying to educate that there are informed decisions that happen around outages. And if your CIO didn't give you the budget that you need for that BCDR to be put in place, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to retable some of those discussions because incidents teach us something interesting here. Secondly, we've got this, we really want to resist the urge to reassure customers that an incident won't happen again. And this is something that's really tempting, especially for our salespeople at Microsoft, to want to go and say, don't worry, we're all over it. This thing will never, ever, ever happen again. The truth, as Sami started us off with, we're never going to be able to avoid outages entirely. And even though we hope that they each teach us something new, sometimes outages do repeat. Sometimes outages repeat before we understand them properly, or we understand them properly, but we still hadn't been able to deploy that relevant change that could prevent it, or before we've been able to apply our learnings across the organization. Similarly, sometimes outages look really similar. Hey, didn't this same thing happen 6 months ago? But they actually involve really different factors. And so if we can have a detailed post-incident review that explains those different factors, we can say, I know it looked and smelt like that outage 6 months ago, but actually it's very different, and some of the failure modes were different, and we've learned something different as a result. And lastly on this list, we really want to try to resist the urge to tell the perfect story. I know it's tempting. Our incident retrospectives internally within Microsoft, when we have these conversations, and even to our customers when we run these live streams, they shouldn't be TED Talk presentations. They shouldn't have this nice arc and a happy ending, and we learned our lesson and it'll never happen again. That's not how this works. And actually, culturally, we want to encourage our teams and even our customers and partners to raise topics that we don't yet have a clear and full understanding of. And sometimes when we're having these live stream interviews with our vice presidents, we'll say, okay, and that's a good learning, and so what are we going to do about that? And the answer is, we don't know yet. Actually, we're still debating. There's these 3 different theories, and this one's got some performance trade-offs, and this one we feel good about, but that one's going to be really labor-intensive. And so we haven't solved it. We haven't fixed it. We're not in a position to reassure you that we've got an exhaustive list of repair items and we're all over it. Sometimes these things take time, and we want to take time to think about it, and we want to represent that authentically to customers instead of pretending everything's great and we've got a nice arc and a happy ending. So these are the 6 ways that we try to make sure that we're learning from incidents here. We've updated our post-incident review templates to try to use a bit more human language here. We don't talk about root cause. We've split our next step section in half, so we can say, here's what we're doing to make incidents like this less likely, or at least less impactful, and here's what customers and partners can do to make this kind of thing less likely moving forward, as I mentioned. We've added a bunch of extra detail into the post-incident reviews. We include information now on dependencies between services. We try to put in timelines so that you can follow along, exactly the impact of yourself. We try to put ETAs on repair items where it makes sense. Hey, we think that by December we're going to have implemented these kind of measures, and resilience guidance, as I mentioned. So a lot of those helps our post-incident reviews to become a bit more thorough and more detailed analyses that should be helpful to you. And lastly, as we've been teasing throughout this whole session, we've launched a series of Azure incident retrospectives where Sami and I will sit down and we'll sit down and interview our engineering leaders and really make sure that they can help us summarize. What did your team learn? What are we going to do differently? And so we've got a couple of links on stage here. Sami, these sessions have really helped us to be more transparent.
When I started 9 years ago in the communications team, we would only publish the status page, and we would kind of sit down, and at the end of it, we'd say, this incident is now mitigated, and that would be everything. So when I look at the Azure incident retrospective slide that had disappeared for now, but when I look at it, I think it's so cool that we have a panel of our corporate vice presidents talking about the challenges of managing global services versus local services, sharing this live with customers. And the live piece is really important because I remember our production team, actually during one of these sessions, we had one of our candidates, one of the people was on Teams, and they forgot to unmute, as we all do on Teams, and the production team cut it out when they published it onto YouTube. And I said, no, leave it in there. We're not here to hide things or make things that we want to appear and show authentic, all the bumps that happen. So from small things to big things, we're really trying hard to push the transparency. After these sessions, of course, we ask customers for feedback because everyone asks customers for feedback. But David and I go through each thing line by line, and we say, how can we make these things better? We understand today, look, outages, they're impactful, they're very painful for customers, but we think we're facing in the right direction. We think we're taking these steps there. And similar to this session here at Ignite, we're hoping, look, please give us feedback. We want to come back. We want to share with you updates. We want to talk about what's going on. We want to be able to do this again and again and hopefully show you the progress that we're making. So David, myself, the comms team back in Redmond as well, in Australia and Dublin, thank you very much for attending our session. Thank you.
Thank you. So,